With me on the show today, I have my special guest, Nick. Nick, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks a lot, Tom. Nice to be here. My name's Nick Bartlett. I'm the director of CBSP Logistics. We are a Hong Kong-based 4PL logistics provider, trading since 2015, and here today to talk about all things e-commerce logistics and the complexities that we're facing across some of the supply chain at the moment.
Nice. And that's a very strong Hong Kong accent you don't have there, Nick.
It's very strong, Tom. People tell me just how local I sound all the time. I originally hail from a small country in the South Pacific, New Zealand. We've been up in Asia for a decade now or so, and what was initially a bit of a backpacker's trip when I was in my mid-20s has kind of turned into a fully fledged enterprise with 2 kids, married. So life sort of really taken a different turn. But unfortunately, my accent has not left me.
No harm. I live in Spain and I haven't picked up the Spanish accent yet either, so we're good. Tell me a little bit about CBIP, Nick.
Sure. Yeah. So look, we started CBIP Logistics in 2015 off the back of kind of having a bit of a stall with our corporate lives. Me and the other founder, who's actually another Kiwi, ironically. We're both up here and sort of living the corporate dream, or you think it is, until you realise that actually it's pretty tough and pretty stale. And we both were really interested in doing something different and invested into a small little business here that was effectively doing freight aggregation, and we sort of started that as a bit of a side hustle. And then we really quickly were really keen to let go of our corporate careers and kind of started to build a real passion and desire to build something different in the logistics industry. Particularly what we were seeing out of China and Hong Kong was that there was all this growth heading towards, particularly in the context of e-commerce, and we just felt like the industry wasn't ready for it. We felt like it's a very fragmented, traditional, transactional based industry, and we felt like there was a real chance to build a different type of logistics model, a model that was centralized around giving customers options, one that was digitally heavy, sustainably focused, and obviously was being built more for the age of the brands that were coming through the pipeline versus maybe the more traditional companies that had always relied on the traditional logistics providers out of Asia. So since 2015, we've been trading as a 4PL. As of today, we have over 55 global vendors that we work with right across freight forwarding, warehousing, fulfillment, international and local domestic delivery, and a team of about 25 permanent FTEs, and then around another 150 people that work on our projects through our subcontractor vendor pool. So a decent sized number of people that are working across the jobs that we're servicing for our customers.
Nice. And what kind of customers are they, and what kind of problems are you solving for them?
Yeah, so we're working predominantly with e-commerce companies. So these are the companies that are producing products in the East predominantly, and then selling through either multiple or single digital sales channels. We do often also service sort of the hybrid businesses, so hybrid brands that also might sell into, say, for example, a retail, like a big box retailer, but also have a really strong online presence. And fundamentally, what the problem that we're solving for these particular brands is that their requirements these days are very different to what the traditional side of the industry has been able to service. So if you look back over the last decade to 2 decades, you sort of see a very progressive, very infrastructure heavy based logistics industry that has supported retail business, in our category of products. That has shifted so drastically and so quickly that the industry has not really kept up. And of course, you have many providers from courier companies to warehouses, but really there isn't any vendors or providers in the market that are bringing e-commerce logistics specific expertise to the table. And when I say expertise, I'm talking about things like warehouse layouts to handling returns to picking individual SKU items versus, just a pallet, for example. The actual physical operational handling is significantly different, and the industry really wasn't up to that. And so what we've done is we've built a business by bringing in a whole bunch of different vendors that have got strengths in their own rights, and then we've effectively deployed solutions inside our vendors and working with them sort of collaboratively to service the new requirements of what we call the new type of customer. And the new customer in our industry is e-commerce brands, and are now making up a really big chunk of what traditional businesses used to do. it's now sort of effectively a new type of customer for them, because the old sort of business they used to do is effectively dried up or changed.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a huge rise in e-commerce with lockdowns and COVID. And is that going to continue, or is that a flash in the pan? Are people going to go back to traditional shopping, or do you think e-commerce is here to stay?
Oh, look, certainly e-commerce is here to stay. Certainly the pandemic accelerated things like no one would believe, but I guess that's what happens when you put a whole bunch of people stuck in their houses, lock the doors, and no one can go anywhere, right? The first place they turn to is their iPhones. And I think just it was a really natural, organic kind of consequence of the pandemic. So whilst definitely was a bit of a flash in the pan in terms of demand, certainly demand is softened, has softened going into the back end of last year and already at the start of this year. But certainly we're going to continue to see this category increasing, maybe not quite at the same exponential rate as it has been, but we continue to sort of make a slower trajectory into it in terms of its growth. With, I think this year is predicted to about 265 million Americans will shop online this year. With a population of 340 million, that's a pretty good percentage. And that also just sort of tells you that I think, behaviors have changed off the back of the pandemic sort of enforcing different behaviors. Maybe once upon a time, the boomer generation may have gone to the store, and during COVID, they now realize the power of Amazon, and they've gone, I don't need to go to Walmart as much as I used to, or, I've sort of changed my own habits as a result of being kind of forced into that circumstance. Certainly the e-commerce landscape is becoming more competitive. There's obviously a lot more competition right across all the different types of product categories that we service. And this year we're seeing a whole bunch of different approaches being taken by the brands to sort of now figure out how they differentiate themselves. I guess it's a bit like what happened in the retail segment. It was all about getting your product on the shop floor. And if you were an early stalwart of that, you had a very good tenure. Right. But what's happened over time is that what you see on the shelf keeps changing. And that's all driven by the fact that more and more brands have joined that retail floor to try and get their products on those shelves. And e-commerce is no different. Someone that was selling rugs or T-shirts, there's now, hundreds of thousands of other brands trying to do the exact same thing to compete with these guys. So it's growing, but certainly maturing and getting more densely competitive as well.
And what kind of steps are they taking to differentiate?
Yeah, so we're seeing some really interesting strategies this year. I think, one of the perceptions with when you have an economic downturn or what's being perceived as one, I'm not necessarily a believer that the downturn is exactly as it's been described. But what we've seen as a result of that is the softening of volumes already, right? And so businesses are applying a few different things. We're seeing quite a few businesses in our portfolio that are now really actively seeking new market expansion quickly, so reaching new customers that they wouldn't have otherwise reached. We're seeing customers adopt more sort of focus on other sales channels, so not just necessarily relying on maybe their one or two core sales channels, such as like an Amazon or a Lazada. They're actually now focusing on, for example, the Shopifys, the Magentos. Maybe they're going into other marketplaces in other jurisdictions. For example, they might enter into Southeast Asia, or they might enter into, say, for even listing themselves on a retail marketplace like Walmart, which they may not have done historically. We're also seeing, obviously, the rise of, the social mediums and the likes of TikTok and how these kind of, millennial-based platforms are influencing how people purchase. And really, like if you're a brand and you're a product, you're not on those places, you're pretty much, not even in the race. So that'd be kind of probably the 3-4 key things we're seeing this year. I mean, you can look at things like payment. There's quite a bit of payment adjustment, I guess, being made in terms of offering customers more payment options to increase basket sizes through the likes of installment payment options, or just other payment gateways such as, WePay, WeChat Pay, or Apple Pay, or whatever it might be, to sort of just, I guess, try and further get better reach with more potential customers that might be using different payment methods for their digital purchases.
Interesting. You mentioned at the start digital and sustainability as well as a differentiator. Talk to me about that. What role does sustainability play?
Yeah, so for us, we kind of made a really active decision to say, if we're going to enter into an industry that is heavily as a heavily driven carbon contributor, then we also have to take a position as a business to support both our suppliers that we're using, but also to represent what we know e-commerce brands and customers are looking for, which is not just sustainability in terms of planting a tree. It goes much more beyond that, right? I think 90% of brands' environmental impact comes from their supply chain. That's a stat that I read recently. And if you look at that and you say, okay, well, hey, if I'm selling, iPhone cases and 90% of my emissions are coming from producing it, shipping it, warehousing it, and delivering it to customers, then surely, and my customers are telling me that they want to purchase from a sustainable brand, then of course, we need to make a decision around how we best be part of that solution. So what we've done is we took a really active decision to say we'll be a fully carbon neutral provider. So we're the only 4PL. So in the context of the industry, we are a 4PL operator, which means that we sit above the providers, and we work with a really wide range of providers across all of those services that I mentioned earlier. And we effectively offset every piece of the activity that we do right across our supply pool. So if you would traditionally work maybe with a courier company, for example, and they say we offset the shipments, then that's cool. But that's only one part of the process. That's not the whole part, right? So we've said, let's go as far up the chain as we can. Let's be the leader in this space, particularly in our operating model, as our operating model provider to be the leader in the sort of sustainability offsetting. And then hopefully we can get to a carbon positive position rather than just being neutral in the long run. That's certainly the position on that. And we're finding that as soon as we have these conversations and we show customers the framework that we've built, the policies that we've derived from the support of our sustainability consultancy, and how we're offsetting and the projects that we're investing into as a result of our offsets, it makes it a lot more real. It can be deemed as a marketing activity. But certainly for us, it's much more than just the benefits that it presents from a brand, our brand perspective. But it's also actually just what's the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is like if you fly, hundreds of thousands of miles a year, and there's a chance at the checkout to purchase a carbon offset for your flights, the right thing to do is to purchase the offset, in our opinion. So we've effectively taken that kind of mantra. Chris and I both have young kids. Safe to say that they're going to grow up in a really different world to the one that we did. And Chris and I both from a really pristine part of the world. And even we've seen changes in that landscape during our lifetime. And I think if there's something we can do to kind of leave a slightly more positive mark, but importantly, giving our customers the chance to also be part of that and then tell their customers, then it's this whole kind of circular strategy that we're trying to adopt and put that in place. As for the digitalization, this is obviously a really big sticking point in logistics. It doesn't matter who you talk to, but people work off Excel spreadsheets, WhatsApp messages and emails, and honestly, mate, it's an absolute when we first got into it, it's just a disaster. So we sort of said that we have to stand for being digitally led. We have to stand for working with the very best technology available in the market. And we have to put it all together so our customers have got exactly what they get if they book on Airbnb or they book on, Skyscanner or whatever it might be in terms of their transparency, pricing, tracking, and giving customers a real sense of that journey that they're on with their provider. Because at the moment, it's just so much smoke and mirrors, and it's a real pain point, and that's certainly part of the problem that we're trying to solve. Now, there are lots of providers in our industry that are really strong when it comes to digital commitment, but they're all very segmentized. So, for example, you have the likes of Flexport, who are very digitally advanced and a thought leader, but they're also just a freight forwarder. Then you've got, the courier companies that have got good integration for facilitation of last mile delivery, but they don't do anything else outside of that. So the idea is that we're trying to really be that bridge and be the control tower, the central vendor, whatever you kind of want to call it, to present all of those different data points into one place. And that's something that we are having some really good success with. It's still very much a work in progress, but we're certainly a lot more progressive than I'd be confident to say than 98% of the rest of the industry. And even the way that we run our customer service, for example, everything is done through Slack channels and ticket systems and just stuff that you expect these days. But most providers are still working off email. and hoping someone will respond. So we're just trying to change that, and I guess that's how we're trying to solve those two. That's how we're bringing those two particular aspects of our offer, digitalization and sustainability, to our operating model.
The use of offsets can be controversial, I guess. Some offsets are better quality than others. How do you decide which offsets to buy into?
So it's a good question, really. So we work with a third-party consultancy called the North Pole. They're a they're a sustainability consultant that specializes working with supply chain businesses, like big brands. And we work with them because they had the widest range of offset opportunities or offset projects that we could get involved with. So you did right. It can be a bit hit and miss, and it can have a bit of a bad perception. But we've focused on reinvesting where we have our biggest carbon contribution to the planet. So, for example, we do a lot of work in Vietnam. So we're investing quite actively back into projects in Vietnam. Now, all of the projects, all of the carbon purchases that we make that go into physical projects that create the offset effectively are vetted by South Pole, and they sort of go through a really rigorous due diligence process, and we sort of have got full trust in that process with them, and they've got a very tight framework to ensure that the quality of those offsets are of the highest standard, because it's sad that something so important is greenwashed so badly, but on the flip side, it's so great that the world has come so far in this conversation, right? It's kind of, it's like there's a cost for everything, is kind of what it tells you, right? Look at e-commerce, right? Like, the cost of e-commerce has been convenience, is great, but actually, hey, it's been pretty bad on the environment, because we've had courier companies dumping parcels that they haven't been able to deliver, and I mean the flow down effects, the negative side of the equation is often forgotten, which is sort of sad in some senses, but also progressive that we're actually making progress over this.
Yeah. And did you say they're called the South Pole or the North Pole Agency?
Sorry, South Pole. South Pole Agency. Yeah.
Good.
Based out of Singapore.
Okay, Singapore, great. I had a guest on the podcast recently, RJ Romano, just last episode actually, and we were talking about the shift in manufacturing and how organizations are starting to nearshore, something that had been talked about for a while, but according to RJ, who works for BDO, this is actually starting to happen now. So that's your neck of the woods. Are you seeing an impact of that?
Yeah, so I definitely think we're definitely seeing it playing out. We're seeing a lot of businesses adopt this kind of China plus one strategy, which is predominantly keeping some production or predominance of their production in the East, and then either redeploying it to another Eastern market. We've seen a lot of really good progress and demand being built up for the non-traditional production market. So, for example, Vietnam has really proven in the last sort of 3 to 5 years just how competitive it can be when it comes to production. And we are seeing a lot of businesses, I guess, de-risking a little bit. And so that sort of strategy around where you produce is definitely softening in terms of its reliance on China, with businesses sort of deploying this kind of China plus one, whether that be plus one in the region or plus one maybe closer to home. And I think, COVID for me was the real kicker, right? It was like everything that shouldn't happen happened all together at the same time. And it was a pretty extraordinary set of circumstances, if you look back on it. And, this whole, all your eggs in one basket strategy is definitely not one that the big boys, I think the big manufacturers want to be sitting around the boardroom saying, hey, we've got all our production in China, and we have another COVID, we have another perfect storm of everything that shouldn't go wrong going wrong. And we get hemorrhaged like we did, not only from a supply perspective, but from a freight point of view, lead times, you name it, it was going on. So I think this sort of migration away from the market that we've all once known to be the dominator is still very much a dominant market, but we are seeing some really good spread across the region, and also people producing closer to home as well.
So I guess to your point, the all the eggs in one basket strategy is never a good idea for anything. So spreading the risk is always and the COVID zero policy that China had really, I guess, brought it home to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's not just applicable to production, but it's proven to be applicable to almost anything in anyone's business, right? If you look at the other facets of logistics, one of the reasons I think our business did so well in the last few years is not because of the high rates that were in the market. It's because we were offering many options under our service umbrella. So, we saw massive congestion with the couriers out of China during peak COVID. We were able to turn on 4, 5, 6 different carrier options within a matter of days for our customers. And that's all about sort of that contingency and de-risking.
Mm.
And as a result, I think, if you look at sort of saying not having all your eggs in one basket, it's probably applicable to your logistics providers, right? It's applicable to your banks.
Yeah.
It's applicable to your insurance companies. I mean, it's a really good lesson and not spreading yourself too thin, but also giving yourself a bit of protection in the event that this crazy set of circumstances plays out again. And if it ever does, I'm not sure if it ever will, but I hope not. But you never know.
Yeah, I hope not. But the linkage between pandemics and climate change has always been there. And it had always been predicted amongst climate scientists that the rise of pandemics would be more likely to happen. So I guess if it's more likely to happen, it might happen more than once. So we've had one. There could, hopefully not, but there could be another, and let's hope not. So Nick, have you got any customer success stories you can speak to? Any wins that you can talk about?
Yeah. So I think, I was sort of thinking about this. What a good example is that sort of, I guess, profiles our operating model as a business, but also something everyone can kind of relate to. So a case study or a piece of business that we worked on for the last 5 years is Deliveroo, the food delivery company.
Oh, yeah.
Now, not a lot of people would probably associate that they'd have many logistics sort of requirements outside of them delivering the food, which is obviously something they control themselves. But Deliveroo is a pretty complicated sort of business in the sense that they have a number of different facets to their business and quite a deep supply chain, from producing all the apparel that the riders ride around in, to producing all of the restaurant equipment and tablets, to stickers that go on windows, to menus, right through to some of their more special projects, such as they've got a project here in Asia called Additions, which is effectively like ghost kitchens. So they have a whole bunch of equipment for ghost kitchens that need to be set up. So they came to us about 5 years ago and had some requirements here in Hong Kong for doing restaurant fulfillment and delivery just locally in the market here. So we started supporting them with that. I think in those days it was about maybe 300 or 400 delivery points. Now we're at sort of around 5,000 delivery points as we're sort of growing with them. But what sort of happened with that relationship was we started in a really small kind of, this is how we can help capacity, and over the last 5 years we've now built out a full regional sort of logistics program for them, which includes forecasting and replenishment of their inventory from China across their rider and restaurant operations. It includes warehousing fulfillment in 4 markets from Taiwan, Australia, Singapore and Hong Kong. Includes integrations with all of their respective online stores where restaurants can order things and riders can order things, to all of the actual physical order management, and then right through to the delivery of all of these different products across retail sites, commercial sites, and to consumers, to the individuals that work for the business. And as a result of kind of that sort of, it's a really good example of where the industry has, or where Deliveroo has leveraged a vendor that has tapped them into. We use about 6 different vendors to deliver this work for 6 to 8 different vendors. So it's sort of, they've had the very best from an early day, I guess, because it's just started out relatively small, and then it's grown organically, but it's sort of just improved sort of the value that's been created as a result of working with a regional customer like that. And we've, as a result, sort of gone on to the UK and to the European businesses as well to offer sort of guidance and support to them on how they could replicate the model we've done here out in the east, back out into to the western market. So sort of that whole 4PL centralized model has been of great sort of success to them, and good cost efficiency and easy to manage, given they've just had to deal with us and not with a whole bunch of other people, and obviously gone through very significant growth over the last 5 years. Like I said, from not much to, literally thousands and thousands of deliveries a month.
Wow. Cool. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Nick. Is there any question that I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
No, I think we've sort of covered most of the ground that we'd hope to set out to do. I think the key message from me is that, we're in this industry to provide something different, to provide a different type of operating model and a different type of solution for our customers and, potential clients that may be out there. But, I think if you're ever at a loss end or your logistics is getting you down, certainly know that there is help around the corner, whether it be from us or from anyone else. But the industry is really progressing. It is moving in the right direction, and it is keeping up with what now is this ever-changing landscape of a new type of logistics requirement in e-commerce. And we're certainly looking forward to seeing more of what we can do both out here in the east and also in the west with our operations here as well. But thanks so much for having me on, Tom. I really appreciate it. It's been good to chat.
Yeah, no, great. And if people want to know more, Nick, about yourself or about any of the topics we discussed on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
So you can just visit us at cbiplogistics.com. We've got all of our information about our digitalization product in terms of our digital products for managing your logistics, right through to our sustainability policies. We've got loads of good content that we pump out every month on a range of different subjects that are, I guess, industry relevant for both e-commerce brands and retail brands as well. And you can check me out on LinkedIn or on Twitter as well.
Okay, superb. I'll put those links in the show notes so everyone has access to them. Great. Nick, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks a lot, Tom.